Download and upload more than ever before with an ultra-fast fiber connection. With 3 simple steps, you can be the one with an SLT fiber optic connection. Visit slt.lk.
Good evening, making headlines first at 9. Can it be the United National Party claims to have formed a national government?
Well, there are several parties who are willing to join us.
Is it time to cut the losses? State Minister of Finance Derana highlights why Sri Lankan Airlines should not be done away with.
There is no financial basis to continue it, but Sri Lankan Airlines makes a national contribution.
A blow for unionists. The Archbishop of Colombo backs the government's stance on private education.
Parents must have the freedom to choose what type of education am I going to give my child, which must be guaranteed.
All this and more on this Friday, the 1st of February 2019.
From Ada Derana, this is Ada Derana First at 9 with Indivari Amuwata and Mahesh Jani. Live from Studio 24 in Colombo.
Very good evening and a warm welcome. Good evening, Mahesh. I think we have a lot to report tonight.
Indeed, good evening, Indivari. Lots of stories to talk about, especially about the Sri Lankan Airlines debacle, I would say. Even the State Minister is here, and we're going to get his reaction to that story as well.
New insight into this is that the government does not want to do away with the national carrier.
That's promising, because at the end of the day, most were talking about, let's get away, give this to a private company and let them take care of this. But if the government is coming out and saying, no, we have to keep that within the purview of the government, that's actually...
So when they say they're not liquidating it, we do have this Minister, Derana, in studio tonight to discuss, and also credit rating agency S&P today said that credit risks are high in Sri Lankan banks. We'd like to discuss that too. But we begin with your local news first. Leader of the House, Lakshman Kiriyala, today submitted a proposal to Parliament.
The proposal is reported to seek approval of the Parliament in increasing the number of ministerial portfolios to 48, stating that the United National Party has formed a national government.
The proposal, which is submitted to the Parliamentary Secretary with the signature of the Leader of the House, Minister Lakshman Kiriyala, suggests to table a proposal in Parliament for the approval under Article 46, Sub-Article 4 of the Constitution. It says, quote, since the United National Party has established a national government as the party which has won a majority of seats in Parliament, the Parliament determines that the number of cabinet ministers should not exceed 48 and the number of non-cabinet and deputy ministers should not exceed 45 according to Article 46 Sub-Article 4 of the Constitution, unquote. According to Article 46 Sub-Article 5 of the 19th Amendment to the Constitution, the national government is defined as a government established by a recognized political party or the independent group which obtains the highest number of seats in Parliament, together with the other recognized political parties or independent groups. United National Party, United People's Freedom Alliance, Tamil National Alliance, Janata Vimukti Peramuna, Sri Lanka Muslim Congress and EPDP are the existing recognized political parties in Parliament. Out of these parties which have not consented to form a national government with the United National Party are United People's Freedom Alliance, Janata Vimukti Peramuna, Tamil National Alliance and EPDP. Accordingly, the United National Party is only capable of forming a national government by joining with the solitary parliamentarian of the Sri Lanka Muslim Congress.
So we submitted the motion to the Speaker today. It will be in the order paper on the 7th and we will be debating it and passing it on the 7th itself. Thereafter, we will set in motion the wheels to form a national government. Well, there are several parties who are willing to join us. I can't disclose the names of the parties at this juncture, but I can assure you that there are 2 or 3 other parties willing to join us.
Well, Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe believes that it is high time that farmers are given freehold deeds for the land they cultivate on. The Premier, who was speaking at an event in Kurunegala organised to distribute deeds to land, today added that budgetary allocations will also be made in the upcoming budget to modernise paddy cultivation.
After 500 years, for the first time, this country became self-sufficient in rice production back when I was Prime Minister in 2003. This became possible because of our farmers. We will be including benefits and funds to modernize our paddy cultivation. When many farmers receive funds or lands, they are not given a deed, only a piece of paper. Therefore, our main responsibility should be providing deeds to our farmers. Secondly, we must pass the law that makes it mandatory that freehold deeds are given to all farmers who do not have one.
President Maithripala Sirisena is unimpressed and is mournful over the performance of certain public institutions. Addressing an event in Rajagiriya, the head of state highlighted excess of staff as a major contributor for the downfall of Sri Lankan Airlines. He was also cautious, saying that possible trade union action is preventing him from naming other entities which bleed the country.
President Maithripala Sirisena declared open the new building of the Finance Commission in Rajagiriya this morning.
We speak of financial discipline, theft, corruption and fraud. One of the main reasons, among others, for Sri Lankan Airlines to be bankrupt is the excess of staff. As I remember, there are around 24 aircraft, but the number of employees are 7,000 or 8,000. Although I can name the institutions which destroy national wealth, I cannot do that, since they will threaten to launch trade union action, demanding that I retract my words. When I retire, I will reveal all the public entities that destroy national wealth, contribute to poverty, as well as reasons behind the treasury being bankrupt.
President Maithripala Sirisena then engaged in an observational tour at the headquarters of 1990 Suvasaria Ambulance Service in Rajagiriya today.
Well, President Maithripala Sirisena is of the view that new constitutional process over the last 4 years have confused the people of this country.
Well, the head of state believes that it has exposed the impatience of one faction of people while making it clear that another have been deceived. Addressing a religious event today, the president also gave his full backing to strengthen the parliament.
President Maithripala Sirisena joined a religious event held at the historic Olaboduwa Sri Jayawardhanarama temple in Horana yesterday. Former Defence Secretary Gotabaya Rajapaksa too joined the event.
I request a stop to work on the expected constitution which causes clashes in the country. Hold elections as per the expectations of the people. I see this proposed constitution as something which confused people for the past 4 years. I don't think that it is possible to form a new constitution in a backdrop where discussions were done for 4 years. On the other hand, in the year ahead, we have to hold elections and elect a new government. I'm yet to see such a constitution which everyone talks about. During the last 4 years, I've seen the impatience of the people in the south and that the people in the north are deceived through this process. I believe that a constitutional amendment should be done to strengthen the parliament to rule the country, and it has my full backing. Today's government doesn't have a single party majority, and that situation might continue. The negative of that is the government has to meet any demand of the minority parties to remain in power. I think that there were foreign interferences in the country over the past 1 or 2 years. I don't appreciate anyone taking advantage of such interferences to remain in power.
Well, it is no secret that the country's national carrier Sri Lankan Airlines has been struggling for some time and been hurt by losses. Last year alone, it incurred a loss of over 180 million US dollars.
Now, with no end to the carrier's travails inside, the President's Expert Committee on Restructuring Sri Lankan Airlines, headed by State Minister of Finance Derana recommended the need for a strategic partner to make the airline viable while cutting the debt. Speaking at a media briefing today, the State Minister of Finance added that and made it clear that although there is no financial basis to continue the airline, keeping the carrier is worth it given it's a national contribution. Now let's get reaction from the very same person who made that comment. Minister Derana Wickramaratne is here in our studios tonight. Welcome, sir, to Studio 24. If we start asking about your comment right there, stating that Sri Lankan Airlines need to be within the purview of the government and under the Sri Lankan government, why do you say that? This is now going into billions and billions of losses every single year.
Yes, Sri Lankan Airlines has made loss, as you mentioned, of more than $180 million in the past financial year, while sister companies dealing with catering and the ground handling businesses have been very profitable. So as you take it as a group, the loss is more closer to a little over $100 million. So on one hand, it is not fair by the taxpayer because they have to foot the bill of having Sri Lankan Airlines. So on a financial return basis, it's questionable as to why the airline should fly. But I think we have to look beyond the financial return. There's an economic return to the country. We have millions and millions of people who come in through to Sri Lanka in a year. About 1/3 of these passengers are carried into the country by Sri Lankan Airlines. And then a lot of tourists are brought into this country by Sri Lankan Airlines. Now one would argue that if Sri Lankan Airlines was not there, maybe other airlines could bring these tourists in. Well, there is some truth to that. It's also an advantage to have an airline flying from point to point to bring in tourists. And therefore, the economic contribution of the airline cannot be underestimated. So if we take that view of the economic contribution, then we need to find out a way in how do we make this group financially viable and not being a burden to the taxpayer.
Minister, if I may ask you that same question, the thing that you just mentioned, saying that it is making losses, but regional airlines like Singapore Airlines or whether Emirates, if you take Emirates as the example, they made a profit during their last financial year. They made a huge profit in terms of their entire operation. So I think there is a problem with the model, the business model that we are looking at for Sri Lankan. What is your take on that?
Yes, clearly we have to look at the business model. I don't think it's a fair comparison to talk about Emirates or Singapore Airlines alone. The problem with Sri Lankan Airlines has been over the decades, not yesterday or today, that it is an undercapitalized airline. Several governments have come and gone, but none of these governments have actually capitalized the airline. Any business needs to have capital, and then it could have debt. This airline hasn't had, it was not fortunate enough to actually have that. So we need to look at the model and we need to remodel it. The truth of the matter is governments in the past haven't put capital because they don't have the capital, or they have priorities, competing priorities for that capital. That situation hasn't changed. And that's why we need to look at an innovative ways of really restructuring this. So we have gone in for not just suggested debt restructuring, but we have suggested for some internal capital generation so that we can make Sri Lankan Airlines and the Sri Lankan Airlines group profitable and keep the Sri Lankan flag flying, and also to rid it of political interference. The question of political interference is not just in Sri Lankan Airlines. All state-owned enterprises, right, if they are to be commercially viable, must be run professionally, and the management needs to have the independence in running it. And what happens often is if it is owned by government, then politics takes over, and that must stop.
And a key recommendation put forth by the committee that studied the strategic partnership for Sri Lanka, I think, is that you would not do away with this, and also that you will go in for a new partnership. Minister, what is the progress in this sense? Have you all started looking for a partner? Because at some point there were certain talks, and then there was also a setback in that regard.
Yes, in the past there was an attempt to basically find a partner for Sri Lankan Airlines, and that process came to a standstill. And that is why the President appointed a committee which I chaired, and we gave high-level policy recommendations. The implementation of it will depend on the board and the management of Sri Lankan Airlines. And so what you said is correct. There has been attempts in the past. But this is suggesting that we look at it in a different way, in a different model. If the airline alone is not profitable and the other businesses are profitable, and we have an economic argument to keep the airline going, then we need to look at the contribution that needs to be made from the national economy too. Because after all, if the benefit is not just to the airline but to the economy as a whole, it will only be fair. So therefore, we are promoting Sri Lanka and Sri Lankan. The brands need to go together. If tourism is going to be a mainstay of this country's exports in the foreseeable future, then I think those synergies must be worked, joint marketing as well as government's contribution towards keeping the airline going.
In terms of looking for a strategic partner again, has the government made any progress?
No, that is actually the recommendations that we have made. We haven't taken over the job of the management of the board of Sri Lankan Airlines. These recommendations for the President, and if the President sees these recommendations as favorable, then he would probably bring it to Cabinet, and then the government would adopt it as government policy.
Very quickly, Minister, I think I'd also like to ask you about the IMF meetings that you held recently, and S&P rating agency says that Sri Lankan banking sector's resilience is weak and is affected by the country's low income levels. We also see that credit growth is hurt here. But let's talk a little very briefly about the IMF and this rating agencies.
Yes, so when we took office in 2015, Sri Lanka had three problems. One was we had a budget deficit, which was about 7.7%, and we have to bring that budget deficit down. Sri Lanka also had a current account deficit. When you look at exports and imports, exports had come down from the highs of 30% of GDP down to about 14%. And the third problem we had in the year 2000, Sri Lanka's foreign currency borrowings, 98.5% was concessionary borrowings. Today, it's only 45%. So exports were going down, and at the same time, foreign currency borrowings were going up. So the country clearly had a problem. What we have tried to do in the last 2 years is to correct the revenue situation. Therefore, Sri Lanka's revenue, government revenue, has increased from 11.5% to nearly 14% in the last 2 years. So we are trying to correct that situation and correct it gradually. So we have a problem clearly. Now, while we manage the economy very carefully, exports increased, the current account deficit was going in the right direction. The budget deficit was coming from 7.7% to about 5.5%. Inflation was coming down. The macroeconomy was stabilizing. Foreign investment had come, not to satisfactory levels, but the trend was in the right direction. We go and have a political coup. What happens when you have a political coup? Political instability. The rating agencies immediately say, due to political instability, not due to economic management, due to political instability, the ratings came down. S&P, Moody's, Fitch brought the ratings down. And as a result of the ratings coming down, the costs go up. So that's the situation that we face. We have been in office only about a month since then. And we are fast stabilizing the situation. You can see that in terms of interest rates are coming down. The currency is going back to its real value. And so the signs of stability are returning.
Right. Thank you very much, Minister, for your time here at Studio 24. We had with us the State Minister of Finance, Minister Derana Vikramaratne. We'll take a short break now.
You are watching Sri Lanka's #1 news channel. This is Other Derana 24.
Welcome back. The national organizer of the Sri Lanka Freedom Party, parliamentarian Duminda Dissanayake, made a proposal today to reappoint President Maithripala Sirisena as the presidential candidate of the party. There have been much speculation all over the SLFP and the SLPP forming a broad coalition, and MP Disanayake's proposal creates more doubt over this move.
The parliamentarian mooted the president as the party's next presidential candidate at the inaugural ceremony of the SLFP's restructural program held in Anuradhapura today.
When we watch television, we doubt whether there is unity among us, because when we mention that our presidential candidate is none other than President Maithripala Sirisena, they are of a different view. They say that the person who will be declared at the last moment will be the presidential candidate.
Parliamentarian Duminda Dissanayake proposed the name of President Maithripala Sirisena to be the next presidential candidate of the SLFP, and it was seconded by former Minister Tissa Karliyadda, following which party members in attendance were asked to express their consent by a show of hands. With move by the SLFP to nominate President Sirisena as their presidential candidate, UPFA parliamentarian Shahant Semasinghe had this to say.
Speaking to the parliamentary group, President Maithripala Sirisena clearly conveyed that he withdraws himself from the UNP and joins with Mahinda Rajapaksa without the intention of contesting in the presidential election.
Well, Archbishop of Colombo, His Eminence Malcolm Cardinal Runch today welcomed the government's move to allow private schools to start their branches. His Eminence vehemently opposed the thinking where trade unions are important in the education sector. During a ceremony held at St. Peter's College grounds, His Eminence in turn insisted that the parents must have the right to choose the type of education for their children, and that right should be guaranteed.
I would like to also publicly express a word of thanks to the government of Sri Lanka for a very courageous decision that they have taken recently to allow the private schools to start 5 branches at a time. This is a very progressive step forward. Education is not a matter of a trade union, because some people think that trade unionism is an important thing in this kind of service. No, the way we shape the lives of our children is extremely important, which means a partnership between the state sector and the private sector. There are some people who have a kind of a sickness to always be critical of the private sector and say they have nothing to do, everything must be done by the state. Such outdated philosophies have been completely rooted in some of the places where they practiced it. For example, in Soviet Russia. But that Soviet Russia doesn't exist anymore. All those philosophies are gone. It is important that religious bodies have a role to play in the formation of the future citizens of this country. Parents must have the freedom to choose what type of education am I going to give my child, which must be guaranteed. I would call upon the government to move forward in this decision that they have made. Therefore, these schools also must not be institutions that represent the West, but they must represent this country, our own people, our culture, our history, whatever is important in our society.
Well, the wage issue of plantation workers took another twist today, with the Tamil Progressive Alliance saying that the relevant Gazette notification on the agreed wage hike was suspended. Minister of Tamil Progressive Alliance threatened to pull out of the government if solutions are not given to their concerns. A discussion was held today, chaired by Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe, with the participation of Minister of Plantation Industries, Minister of Labour and representatives of the Tamil Progressive Alliance. An agreement was inked earlier in the week to increase the daily wage of plantation workers to 700 rupees.
Well, festivals are a common theme reoccurring in the Sri Lankan calendar. Given the diverse nature of our people, the country boasts a multitude a festival dedicated to the various cultures, religions and ethnicities. But the question is, Indivari, now, are there any festival which celebrates our collective identity as Sri Lankans?
Well, our Sri Lankanness that we all share together, irrespective of our religion, ethnicity or Sri Lankans, the civil organization Mother Sri Lanka is determined to bring together in celebrating what it calls our Sri Lankanness. And that's why the second Love Sri Lanka Festival is organized over the weekend at the Vihara Mahadevi Park.
The Mother Sri Lanka is a movement which started in 2008 by the Mother Sri Lanka Trust, which is a non-profit independent charity. Speaking to First at 9, the founder and the chairman of the movement, Dr. Janaki Kurupu explained what it means to be a responsible citizen, which the movement is attempting to promote.
There is a responsibility to give back to the country, and if you're getting any benefits from your motherland, we as citizens of Sri Lanka, we have a duty to give back to the country. We should all be part of looking after public property and maintaining them and be using them carefully without wastage. So whether it is resources, whether it is about being honest, not being corrupt, not taking bribes, so all these, they are all part of being a responsible citizen. And in Sri Lanka, we are also looking at this ethnic harmony. So even there, if you're going to create problems between different ethnic groups or religious groups in the country, then also you're being irresponsible. You can start the change with you. If I put the garbage in the right place, if I cross the road always at the crossing, then you can get another 2 people, 5 people to follow you. So funding is a problem, finding volunteers to do the work is a problem, changing attitude in adults is a problem, changing attitudes in children is not so difficult, and we are succeeding very well with the children.
Love Sri Lanka Festival 2019 is going to be the second festival organized by Mother Sri Lanka to be held in line with the Independence Day.
Being proud to be a Sri Lankan. Why aren't more people excited about this? We are Sri Lankan, we are proud to be Sri Lankan. India just celebrated their Independence Day, but here Independence Day comes and goes, and I don't know, maybe you feel differently, but I feel it's like any other day. February 4th comes and goes. The Buddhists will celebrate Vesak, the Christians will celebrate Christmas, then the Hindus will celebrate Deepavali, and Muslims will celebrate another function. But is there any day that we can all celebrate, regardless of what religion, what ethnic group you belong to? What better day than our Independence Day to celebrate as Sri Lankans? So, Love Sri Lanka Festival was launched last year, February 4th, it was 70th Independence. Now we want to continue this every year. So this year, Love Sri Lanka Festival is happening this weekend, February 2nd and February 3rd, Saturday and Sunday, at Vihara Mahadevi grounds. It's from 10 a.m. in the morning to 10 p.m. in the night. Whole day of celebration for everybody. And for 1 day or 2 days, stop complaining about the country and feel happy about what we have in this country.
International news now. The death toll in one of the worst cold snaps to hit the U.S. Midwest in a decade has risen to 21. 90 million people, which is a third of the U.S., have seen temperatures of minus 17 degrees Celsius or below. Some 250 million Americans overall have experienced the polar vortex conditions. Hospitals are treating patients reporting frostbites as part of the country ground to a halt. Now, temperatures, however, are expected to swing to above average over the weekend. A hospital in Chicago has already treated 50 patients for frostbites, while some people were found dead a short walk from their homes.
We'll return with your sports news after this short break.
Are watching Sri Lanka's #1 news channel. This is Other Derana 24.
Welcome back, everyone. Now, the name Arjuna Ranatunga became a household name even before the figure entered politics and went on to become a minister. It came in 1996 when he captained Sri Lanka and steered them to a World Cup glory. Now, Sri Lanka have had a tough time emulating that success since. And over the last couple of years, their form has somewhat fallen off a cliff.
Now, the Minister of Transport and Civil Aviation, the World Cup winning captain, aims to do a clean-up job at Sri Lanka cricket by contesting for its vice presidency in the looming election. Speaking to media following a function held at Udugampula, Minister Arjuna Ranatunga went on to say that the door should be closed or players whose primary desire is something else other than play for their country.
I decided to contest this election. I might be qualified for the presidency, but it's legally impossible for me to hold that position. But I will come in as a vice president and I will rebuild cricket in this country. There might be people I dislike, but we should get together for the sake of cricket. I came forth this time to move forward with a competent team. People who played with me and before me have come forward to lend us a hand. I put myself forward to correct the mindset and the discipline of players and move forward ahead of the World Cup. I will present my plan in the future. There are huge problems in the administration as unsuitable people are occupying positions. There are issues with players as well regarding discipline and dedication. We can correct those. Players who do not want to play for their country should not be in the team.
That's all from us here tonight. Thank you for joining us. Do log on to www.otherderana.lk for all the stories that you missed and for a recap of our newscast. I'm Indibari Amwat.
I'm Mahesh Johnny. Enjoy the long weekend. Good night.